Hi, this is the AI Storyteller. I'm Mark. The book we are going to interpret in this issue is the classic literary masterpiece, The Count of Monte Cristo. The Count of Monte Cristo is not a traditional classic in the conventional sense, but rather a classic in the realm of popular fiction and popular culture. If we were to organize a global poll of best-selling authors over the past 500 years today, Alexandre Dumas would likely still hold a prominent place. While some authors may have enjoyed popularity for a few decades, Dumas has been a bestseller for over 200 years. Although its cumulative sales may not reach the level of the Bible, The Count of Monte Cristo was unquestionably a phenomenon of the 19th century. How popular was this book at the time? It was translated into multiple languages like English, German, and Danish right away. People across Europe were clamoring to buy the novel, and Alexandre Dumas had fans everywhere. There was even a Portuguese writer who wrote a sequel to The Count of Monte Cristo in Dumas's name, and it was immediately translated into various languages, including a French edition. When Dumas found out, he was furious. However, what Dumas did not anticipate was that the themes of escape and revenge he explored in The Count of Monte Cristo would be paid homage to and imitated time and time again by future generations. Master of suspense and thriller, Stephen King wrote dozens of works, and his novel centered around escape, The Shawshank Redemption, is undoubtedly one of his most important. The film adaptation of the same name has even made it into the list of 100 years, 100 films. As for the novel itself, it is a true intellectual property gem, having been adapted into films, TV shows, and musicals over 50 times. Victor Hugo praised Dumas as belonging not only to France but to Europe, and even more so, to the world. He is the disseminator of French thought. Dumas's works were beloved worldwide not only because of their compelling stories but also because French was a dominant language and French culture was a strong force during that time. The Count of Monte Cristo tells the story of the era in which Dumas lived. Therefore, let's use the year 1844, when the Count of Monte Cristo began serialization, as a reference point to examine the political and economic situation in mid-19th century France. In 1844, France was still under the rule of Louis Philippe I. Although France was no longer the dominant power sweeping across Europe under Napoleon, the enlightened rule of Louis Philippe I ended prolonged wars, and peace agreements were reached with neighboring countries. In a stable and peaceful environment, capitalist economy experienced rapid development. The bourgeoisie's status was on the rise, and newspapers and magazines did not dare to neglect this significant readership. One of the trump cards they used was serializing novels. To keep up with the latest story developments, readers had to buy newspapers every day. The Count of Monte Cristo was initially serialized in Le Journal de Debats for a year and a half. Writing an engaging serialized novel is no easy feat. The story must have twists and turns and be unpredictable to keep readers hooked. The author also needs excellent writing skills to seamlessly reintroduce previous plot details or character introductions because some readers might start reading the serialization midway and not be familiar with the earlier storylines, requiring such previously on summaries. We are reading The Count of Monte Cristo, and it indeed exhibits the characteristics of these serialized novels. The Count of Monte Cristo has another distinctive feature: extensive dialogues. In fact, Alexandre Dumas employed a clever tactic at the time. Newspapers paid authors based on the number of lines, so he came up with the idea of writing more dialogues to earn higher fees. After completing The Count of Monte Cristo, Dumas was able to use a substantial sum of 500,000 francs to build the Château d'If, even playfully naming his workspace Château d'If, the place where the Count of Monte Cristo was imprisoned for 14 years. Despite Dumas' prosperity as a prolific writer, he also experienced a period of hardship in his childhood. Originally named Alexandre Dumas, his father, Thomas Alexandre Dumas, was the illegitimate son of a French nobleman and a Haitian slave, giving Dumas African heritage. Thomas Alexandre Dumas played a significant role in the French Revolution, quickly rising to the rank of general through valor and skill. Unfortunately, he passed away too early, and Alexandre Dumas's mother had to seek refuge with her 4-year-old son at her father's inn. In his youth, Alexandre Dumas enjoyed reading Robinson Crusoe and 1001 Nights. By the time he turned 20, unable to tolerate his grandfather's harsh criticism any longer, he set off for Paris with only 53 francs in his pocket to seek a better future. Initially, he made a living by writing humorous plays, gradually becoming one of the most successful serialized novelists. While others were paid 30 sous per line, his fee had risen to 3 francs per line, nearly double that of other writers. With the publication of The Three Musketeers, 20 years after, and The Count of Monte Cristo, he reached the pinnacle of his career, achieving both fame and fortune. However, Dumas was known for his lavish spending habits, which often left him in financial difficulty, at one point even having 150 creditors chasing after him. Earning higher fees to pay off his debts became a significant motivation for Dumas to continue writing. Dumas's prolific output was not solely due to his strong creative drive but also because he employed a collaborator or assistant. One of the most famous of these assistants was Auguste Maquet, who played a significant role in works like The Three Musketeers and The Count of Monte Cristo. They even ended up in court over copyright disputes, with Dumas eventually paying Maquet 140,000 francs in exchange for relinquishing his right to authorship of all their works. Later research revealed that their collaboration model was roughly as follows. Dumas would outline the main themes and story, while Maquet would gather historical information and draft the initial version. Dumas would then take over to polish the story and language, making it more vivid and exciting. The final version that readers see is the result of Dumas's refinement. You can see that the advanced production line of contemporary popular literature and the film industry was already quite mature during Dumas's era. However, we must acknowledge that Dumas was a remarkably talented writer, able to find highlights in mundane gossip, and with skillful editing, transform it into a story that captivated readers and kept them eagerly following along. Take The Count of Monte Cristo as an example. Dumas drew inspiration from a piece of sensational news. A shoemaker named Pierre Picot was about to marry a beautiful and wealthy widow when he was falsely accused of being a royalist spy by a jealous friend and thrown into prison. After his release, he spent 10 years plotting revenge, succeeding multiple times, but ultimately met his demise at the hands of an enemy who fatally stabbed him. While this might have been a casual anecdote for most people, Dumas keenly recognized its value. When asked what history was, this great writer replied, "History is that nail on which I hang my novels." Dumas' brilliance lay in embedding his stories into real historical backgrounds, allowing readers to smoothly enter the narrative with a greater sense of immersion. Let us draw back the curtain on the story of the Count of Monte Cristo and travel back to the year 1814, a time of tumultuous change and upheaval. Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte was first exiled to Elba, the Bourbon dynasty was restored, and Louis XVIII regained power. Royalists, Napoleon's loyalists, revolutionaries, and various factions took turns in the spotlight, with hidden currents running beneath the surface. However, for the common people, the political machinations in the halls of power were like gods clashing in the heavens, and their everyday lives remained largely unchanged. Our protagonist, Edmond Dantes, was one such content young man who paid little heed to politics. At the beginning of the novel, Alexandre Dumas sketched out the character of a spirited young man in just a few strokes. Edmond Dantes had a pair of beautiful black eyes and a head of dark hair. Standing on the merchant ship Pharaon, he exuded confidence and agility. At the age of 19, he had already become the first mate, and when the ship's captain unexpectedly fell ill, Edmond remained composed and safely navigated the Pharaon into port. The ship's owner, Mr. Morel, held Edmond in high regard, treating him like a son, and planned to promote him to captain. However, this decision sparked jealousy from another young man, the ship's accountant, Danglars. Edmond sensed the hostility from his colleague Danglars but paid it little mind, eager to reunite with his beloved Mercedes. At that moment, Edmond felt that fate had bestowed upon him a great gift, a promising career and Mercedes' acceptance of his marriage proposal. Little did he know that a conspiracy was forming against him. Leading this conspiracy was Danglars, along with Fernand, who loved Mercedes but couldn't win her affection, and Edmond's neighbor and a drunkard, Catullus. The three men, fueled by alcohol, schemed to ruin Edmund's life. Danglars, with a devious mind, remembered a detail. Edmund had made a detour to the island of Elba on the return journey of the merchant ship, where he delivered a letter to the exiled Emperor Napoleon and was entrusted with another letter to be delivered to a trusted ally in Paris. He immediately drafted an anonymous denunciation letter, accusing Edmund of being a Bonapartist agent, a grave offense at the time. However, in a sudden change of heart, Danglars claimed that he couldn't falsely accuse someone, crumpled up the letter, and threw it aside before leaving. Fernand, driven by his own jealous obsession with Mercedes, found the discarded denunciation letter and believed he was anonymously exacting revenge on Edmund. Blissfully unaware, Edmund was eagerly preparing for his wedding with Mercedes, when a group of police officers barged into the celebration and arrested him. Facing the questioning of the interim prosecutor, de Villefort, Edmund remained composed, believing in his own integrity and trusting that de Villefort would ensure a fair investigation. However, de Villefort faced a dilemma. He discovered that Edmund's contact in Paris was none other than his own father. If this fact were to be revealed, exposing that his father was still collaborating with the exiled Emperor Napoleon, it would jeopardize de Villefort's own political career. Therefore, de Villefort chose to send Edmund to the Château d'If prison. A case of wrongful accusation was born. At this point, it's worth applauding Alexandre Dumas for his profound storytelling ability, as he masterfully portrays four distinct antagonists with their own motivations and characters. They each have their unique role to play in the conspiracy, and their names, identities, and traits are essential for the unfolding of the story. First, there's the instigator, Danglars, a sly and cunning figure who orchestrates the plot with subtle manipulations. Fernand takes on the role of the executor, driven by love to fall into Danglars' trap and submit the denunciation letter. However, it's prosecutor de Villefort who plays the decisive role. Without his involvement, the denunciation letter would have been a harmless prank. De Villefort, a cold-hearted opportunist, sacrifices another young man's future for the sake of his own political ambitions. As for the neighbor Catullus, he stumbles into the conspiracy without much thought. Some readers might consider Catullus a superfluous character, but he represents a kind of banal evil. Unlike the other three with clear agendas, he becomes an unwitting accomplice due to sheer coincidence. Catullus also experiences a moment of conscience but ultimately goes along with the plan. Mr. Morel, the ship's owner, and Mercedes firmly believed in Edmond Dante's innocence and tirelessly worked to clear his name. However, at this moment, Napoleon Bonaparte secretly landed on the French mainland, receiving a warm welcome from the people and the army. He swiftly marched to Paris, where Louis XVIII fled in haste, leading to the resurgence of the Napoleonic Empire. Now that Napoleon was back in power, it could be argued that Edmond Dantes, who had delivered letters for him, was a hero. Mr. Morel had intended to use this point to save Edmond. However, the political situation took another dramatic turn when Napoleon's forces suffered defeat at the Battle of Waterloo, marking the end of the 100 Days and resulting in the emperor's exile to the island of St. Helena, with no chance of a comeback. Edmond Dantes' case was thus sealed. While the world outside was filled with political intrigue and uncertainty, Edmond Dantes, imprisoned in the Château d'If, remained oblivious to these events. He couldn't fathom why he found himself behind bars, stripped of his freedom, separated from his loved ones, and likely never to see the light of day again. As time passed, Edmond descended into despair, even contemplating starving himself to death. However, just when he was on the brink of giving up, he encountered a guardian angel in the form of his fellow prisoner, the Abbé Faria. The Abbé Faria had been planning an escape and was digging a tunnel using improvised tools. Unfortunately, he miscalculated the direction and ended up beneath Edmund's cell. The chance encounter led to a deep and enduring friendship between the two men. It could be said that Edmond Dantes had three fathers in his life: his biological father, who brought him into the world and raised him, Mr. Morel, who valued him highly before his arrest and tirelessly fought for his innocence afterward, and the Abbé Faria, who became his mentor and guide to a new life. The Abbé Faria first helped Edmund uncover the truth behind his wrongful imprisonment, identify his enemies, and lay the groundwork for future revenge. He also imparted his vast knowledge to Edmund. At this point in the story, we can glimpse that Edmond Dantes is a clever young man, but due to his humble background, he had to set sail at a young age to make a living. Knowledge is power, a timeless truth applicable to any era. Alexandre Dumas understood this, and his protagonist, Edmond Dantes, embraced it as well. While digging the tunnel, Edmond diligently studied under the Abbé Faria's guidance. It's clear that Edmond was a smart young man, but his circumstances forced him into a life at sea at a young age. Now, back to the captivating theme of imprisonment and escape within storytelling. The appeal of this theme lies in the confined setting, which adheres to the classical dramatic principle of the unity of time, place, and action, making it conducive to creating intense conflicts. This principle dictates that a story should take place within a single day, in a single location, and have a relatively straightforward plot. Following this principle allows for a focused and compact narrative. In the case of the Count of Monte Cristo, for example, as Edmond Dantes and the Abbé Faria dig their tunnel, they must constantly evade the prison guards, creating a tense and thrilling atmosphere. The closed environment also serves as a crucible for testing human nature, and Alexandre Dumas masterfully portrays the enduring friendship between Edmond and the Abbé amidst adversity. In another masterpiece with the same theme, The Shawshank Redemption, the main character Andy and his fellow inmate Red's friendship is cemented while they work in the prison library, with a nod to the Count of Monte Cristo. Andy and Red joke that the book should be classified under education, signifying their shared understanding without needing to say it explicitly. This illustrates how the Count of Monte Cristo has become a literary touchstone in this genre. For centuries, the development of this storytelling trope has often seen variations in the methods of escape. Writers and screenwriters constantly innovate. In The Count of Monte Cristo, the escape method involves tunneling, and in The Shawshank Redemption, there's also a memorable tunneling scene. In the American TV series Prison Break, modern technology plays a significant role, continuously refreshing the audience's imagination. However, despite the changes, the essence remains the same. When we revisit the originator of this storytelling trope, The Count of Monte Cristo, by Alexandre Dumas, we are still amazed at how well he mastered the entire storytelling process, adhering to the golden rule of storytelling. Despite knowing that Edmond Dantes, the protagonist with the halo, will inevitably succeed in his escape, the author repeatedly keeps you on the edge of your seat. Just when you think the plan is about to succeed, the Chateau d'If's graveyard turns out to be the vast sea, leaving readers taken aback. After such twists and turns, Edmund's eventual escape maximizes the release of the reader's emotions, leading to a strong sense of empathy with the main character. As mentioned earlier, Alexandre Dumas expertly blends fiction with reality. The historical backdrop is real, and the island of Monte Cristo does exist, although the island's appearance differs somewhat from the novel's descriptions. The island is located between Corsica and Italy. It was during a trip with Napoleon's nephew to this island in 1841 that Alexandre Dumas was inspired to create the story. He told the young prince, to commemorate this trip, I will write a novel and use the name The Count of Monte Cristo for the title. 3 years later, the author fulfilled his promise, beginning the serialization of The Count of Monte Cristo. In the initial outline, the story began in Italy. A French tourist met a mysterious Italian millionaire who showed him around. Later, the millionaire traveled to France, entered high society through the tourist's introduction, and discovered his enemies. Readers can easily discern that the latter part of The Count of Monte Cristo still retains the structure of the original outline. After successfully escaping and obtaining the treasure, Edmond Dantes patiently waited for 9 years until the time was right to reappear in Rome and used the opportunity to get close to Mercedes and Fernand's son, Albert. During those 9 years, what did Edmond Dantes do? He located the least guilty of his 4 enemies, his former neighbor Caterus, who now ran an inn. Caterus' account confirmed the Abbé Faria's suspicions. The other enemies had all achieved great success. Danglars, the envious accountant who resented Edmond's promotion by Mr. Moreau, became a wealthy banker, amassing a vast fortune and wielding influence in the bond market. The acting prosecutor de Villefort, who handled Edmond Dante's case, enjoyed a thriving career, commanding respect as an upright and impartial magistrate. Mercedes, Edmond's lost love, had waited in vain for him and, heartbroken, ultimately accepted the marriage proposal of the Count de Morcerf, Fernand. They also had a son, Albert. The Count of Monte Cristo's feelings toward Albert were complex. Albert was the child of his enemies and the woman he loved. He should have hated the child to his core, but Albert turned out to be a genuinely likable young man with a noble heart and no deceit. Even when kidnapped, he managed to sleep soundly in his captor's hideout. The mastermind behind the kidnapping was, in fact, the Count of Monte Cristo himself. He orchestrated Albert's abduction, ventured into the lion's den to pay the ransom personally, and thus earned the young man's trust, making him a loyal friend. Albert asked the Count to promise that if he ever came to Paris, he would visit him. The Count of Monte Cristo had been waiting for this moment. He was waiting for an opportunity, a way to infiltrate high society in France, and Albert was his ticket. The grand scheme of revenge had already begun. The Count of Monte Cristo knew that his opponents were formidable. Danglars represented the power of money. The newly minted Count de Morcerf was both a military hero and a political player, and de Villefort held the authority of the judiciary. To take on all three, the Count had to meticulously plan his moves. He started by purchasing 2 horses from Danglars' stable at a high price and then gave a diamond along with the horses as a gift to Danglars' wife, not only saving face but also establishing a reputation as a fabulously wealthy man in Parisian high society. Next, he had his servant intercept a runaway carriage, rescuing the wife and son of de Villefort. This act earned him a reputation for kindness and nobility. Now, all of Paris was talking about this mysterious, wealthy count, and rumors about his background grew increasingly fantastical. Alexandre Dumas truly lived up to his reputation as a masterful writer, skillfully building the atmosphere and keeping both the characters and readers on edge. Finally, the first major social gathering was about to take place. The Count of Monte Cristo arranged a grand banquet at his villa, inviting guests that included his enemies, the Villeforts and the Danglars, as well as an Italian prince named Andrea. Each guest had their own agenda, with Danglars trying to get closer to Andrea, and the interactions between Villefort and Danglars' wife harboring hidden intentions. Little did they know, Villefort and Danglars' wife had a past rendezvous, and this very villa had been their secret meeting place where Danglars' wife had given birth to a son, a child whose fate remained unknown. Was the Count of Monte Cristo's acquisition of this villa mere coincidence, or was there another hidden agenda? Both Villefort and Danglars' wife were filled with anxiety and unease. The plot continued to thicken. Shortly after the banquet, Fernand de Morcerf, now a count, hosted a ball, and the Count of Monte Cristo was invited. Mercedes had once deeply loved Edmond Dantes, but upon seeing the Count of Monte Cristo for the first time, she had a sense of foreboding. Although the man before her was unrecognizable as Edmond, she noted his eyes bore an expression of deep melancholy, sometimes surmounted by a flash of sinister hatred and determination. His face had turned pale from the long absence of daylight and sunshine, and his dark hair, combined with his pale complexion, gave him an air of elegance and beauty characteristic of northern men. The Count of Monte Cristo was no longer the impoverished young man named Edmond Dantes, just as Mercedes was no longer the humble fisherman's daughter. After more than 20 years since their abrupt separation, he had become a wealthy count, and she had become the noble Countess de Morcerf. As they stood alone in the conservatory, their shared history weighed heavily on them, yet it remained unspoken. Mercedes desperately wanted to determine one thing: was the Count a friend or an enemy? Unaware of the conspiracies of the past, she believed that he might be seeking revenge against her husband and son for her betrayal when she married Morcerf. She offered him fruit, but the Count firmly declined, causing the Countess to turn pale. According to ancient customs, one does not accept food from an enemy. The Count of Monte Cristo used this act to express his stance on revenge. A storm was quietly brewing, and it began with the ominous cloud hanging over the Villefort household. Villefort's father-in-law, mother-in-law, and servant all died in quick succession, casting suspicion on his daughter, Valentine. Villefort found himself in a dilemma. He didn't believe his daughter capable of murder, but if she were guilty, should he uphold justice and maintain his image as an upright magistrate by prosecuting her? Meanwhile, Danglars faced multiple setbacks in the bond market, and his bank's financial situation became dire. This was also a trap set by the Count of Monte Cristo. He secretly bribed the news bearer and altered the contents of the news, causing Danglars to make incorrect investment decisions based on insider information. To prevent the bank from collapsing, Danglars needed to find a financial savior, and he set his sights on Prince Andrea. The banker hoped to arrange a marriage between the prince and his daughter, believing that this wealthy suitor would rescue him from financial ruin. However, there was a hurdle in his path: Albert. Danglars and Count de Morcerf had long arranged for their respective children to marry each other. How could he break off the engagement without losing face? The Count of Monte Cristo, understanding the situation, subtly suggested that Danglars should investigate the history of the Morcerf family's rise to wealth. The shrewd Danglars quickly understood the Count of Monte Cristo's intentions and sent someone to Greece for an investigation. The results came back swiftly. Fernand de Morcerf had once been a destitute youth named Fernand, who served under Ali Pasha, a historical figure. At first, Ali Pasha was just a local warlord in the Ottoman Empire, but with the empire's support, he began to rule the region of Ioannina, which was located in northwest Greece and held significant economic and cultural importance during the Byzantine and Ottoman eras. In 1820, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire ordered Ali Pasha to return to Turkey for questioning, but Ali Pasha defied the order, rallied armed forces from various Greek regions, and resisted the Ottoman Empire. Although Ali Pasha eventually succumbed to the overwhelming might of the Ottomans, he remained a historical figure of great significance. Alexandre Dumas' novels were bestsellers for a significant reason: he had a deep understanding of his core readership, the aesthetics and tastes of the bourgeoisie. With the expansion of colonialism, many Europeans developed a strong interest in the mysterious East. However, not everyone had the means to travel to the Orient. Dumas timely introduced exotic elements in his books, such as Ali Pasha's history, the beautiful slave Haiti, and Eastern clothing and cuisine, fulfilling Western readers' fantasies about the East. The sordid past of Fernand de Morcerf was exposed by the press, making him the laughingstock of Paris. Albert demanded satisfaction for his father's honor, and the Count of Monte Cristo readily accepted, willing to kill his enemy's son. However, Mercedes suddenly visited, begging the Count to spare her son's life. The Count of Monte Cristo revealed the truth of the past and his 14 years of inhuman suffering in prison. But Mercedes, desperate to save her son, pleaded with the Count to spare Albert. Their enduring love forced the Count of Monte Cristo to make a concession. He promised to spare Albert's life. However, in this life-or-death duel, Albert's survival meant that someone else had to die. Alexandre Dumas skillfully employed elements of classical tragedy to create intense dramatic conflict. At this moment, the Count of Monte Cristo found himself in a dilemma, and he made the decision to give up his pursuit of revenge, even if it meant sacrificing his own life. The next morning, the Count of Monte Cristo, filled with a resolve to face death, headed to the dueling ground. However, to his surprise, Albert had undergone a complete change of heart. Albert not only called off the duel but also begged the Count for forgiveness. It turned out that after Mercedes implored the Count of Monte Cristo, she revealed the truth about the past to her son. Now that the truth was clear, the mother and son left the glittering life of Paris behind. Fernand de Morcerf, the Count de Morcerf, formerly known as Fernand, watched as his once carefully crafted life unraveled before his eyes. His wife left him decisively, and his son learned the truth about his character. The disgraced Count chose to end his life with a gunshot. On the other hand, Danglars reveled in his joy, having successfully secured a wealthy suitor for his daughter. He only needed the couple to sign the marriage contract, and his financial crisis would be resolved. However, amidst all his calculations, he underestimated the Count of Monte Cristo. A group of constables stormed Danglars' mansion, declaring their intent to apprehend a former galley prisoner who had escaped from Toulon prison. In reality, there was no Prince Andrea, there was only the small-time swindler Benedetto, whom the Count of Monte Cristo had instructed to impersonate a wealthy man and deceive Danglars. The shrewd banker lost face in front of the Parisian aristocracy. What was even more devastating for him was the precarious state of his business. Simultaneously, a cloud of death loomed over the Villefort household. Valentine, the daughter of Villefort, became the next victim. The perpetrator was none other than Villefort's wife, who was desperate to ensure her biological son became the sole heir by eliminating everyone else. Villefort, unwilling to tarnish his reputation with the family scandal, ordered his wife to take her own life while he was away at court. The person he was set to prosecute in court turned out to be Benedetto, the former galley prisoner who had swindled Danglars. This trial unveiled a shocking secret. As mentioned earlier, Villefort and Danglars' wife had a secret child together, which she believed had died shortly after birth. However, in a twist of fate, the child survived but grew up to be the con artist Benedetto. The child, thought to be stillborn, was actually buried in the backyard of their villa. However, on that fateful night, the child miraculously survived, albeit unwittingly becoming a swindler named Benedetto. In court, Villefort had to face the truth about his past, and it drove him to madness. As the crisis unfolded, Danglars, witnessing the imminent collapse of his bank and the loss of his affluent lifestyle, received a 5 million franc check from the head of the poorhouse. Fueled by fear and desperation, he made his escape, believing he could live comfortably for the rest of his life. However, he fell into the trap of kidnappers. Yes, the same gang that had abducted Albert. Astute readers might have already guessed that this was also part of the Count of Monte Cristo's plan. The kidnappers presented an exorbitant ransom demand, and Danglars, who valued his wealth above all else, had no choice but to comply. After exhausting his fortune, Danglars found himself in dire straits overnight, and his hair turned white with worry. The Count of Monte Cristo's long-awaited revenge was finally achieved, and the story reached its conclusion, where wrongdoers faced the consequences of their actions, and virtuous individuals found their rewards. Mercédès' son, Albert, changed his name and enlisted in the military, determined to clear his father's tainted reputation. Mercédès returned to Marseille and found 3,000 francs that Edmond Dantès had left for her in the garden of the cottage he had bequeathed to her. This money had once symbolized the young man's hopes for a better future, and now it would ensure Mercédès' well-being in her later years. The Count bid farewell to Mercédès at the old house, saying goodbye to their shared past. They had both changed over the years, and though their hearts still held traces of their former love, they cherished different people the most. For Mercédès, it was her son, Albert, and for the Count of Monte Cristo, it was the Eastern slave girl, Haydée. The Count suddenly realized, on the eve of the duel, that his feelings for Haydée had surpassed even a father's love for his daughter. The enemy, Fernand de Villefort's daughter, Valentine, did not die, as the Count of Monte Cristo had saved her. Because the son of the shipowner, Mr. Morel, who had once helped Edmond Dantès, fell in love with the girl, the Count orchestrated their union as a gesture of gratitude. He also generously endowed them with much of his wealth. The Count of Monte Cristo set sail with Haydée, as the novel's opening suggested, and the young sailor Edmond Dantès returned from his long voyage. The 20-year saga of love, hate, and revenge had become a distant memory, leaving us with a message of hope and waiting. The story of the Count of Monte Cristo can be summed up as the transformation of the protagonist from a man to a god, and then back to being human. In fact, Alexandre Dumas hid a deeper meaning in the names of Edmond Dantès and the Count of Monte Cristo. In French, the pronunciation of Dantès is very close to Dante, and Monte Cristo already contains the word Christ. At the beginning of the novel, Edmond Dantès is a flesh-and-blood human being with emotions. He cares for his father, feels gratitude towards shipowner Morel, and dreams of marrying his fiancée, Mercédès. However, fate plays a cruel joke on him, leading him into despair. He is wrongfully imprisoned, loses his beloved, and witnesses the ugliness of humanity, just like the poet Dante in the Divine Comedy as he descends into hell, witnessing horrifying scenes. When Edmond Dantes successfully escapes from prison, he returns from hell to the mortal world. Since the world lacks justice and a divine presence advocating for it, he decides to act in the name of Christ. The Count of Monte Cristo, as depicted by Dumas, has nearly perfect characteristics: handsome, intelligent, knowledgeable, wealthy, and resilient. He is nearly invincible, and his revenge plan is flawlessly executed, defeating 3 formidable adversaries through his wits. However, it's important to note that the Count of Monte Cristo never directly takes the lives of his enemies. Instead, he exploits their weaknesses, such as their dark secrets and internal conflicts, forcing them into inescapable traps. Madame de Villefort cherished her biological son above all else, and the Count exploited this vulnerability, luring her into committing murder. Banker Danglars' insatiable greed prevented him from seeing through the clumsy ruse of the so-called Prince Andrea. Feuding rivals Fernand swallowed the bitter fruit of his betrayal. Prosecutor Villefort was willing to murder his illegitimate son to eliminate any future threats, only to face retaliation in the end. Each step of the revenge plan is meticulously designed, relying on strategy rather than chance, adhering to the principles of a master storyteller. The Count of Monte Cristo's divine power also extends to repaying kindness. When shipowner Moreau faced the prospect of his company's bankruptcy, the Count secretly intervened to help him avoid financial ruin, ultimately bestowing most of his wealth upon Moreau's children. The priest Abbé Faria, who had longed to publish his work completed in prison, had his wishes fulfilled years later when the Count of Monte Cristo purchased his legacy from the prison. However, upon learning that Madame de Villefort had poisoned her own innocent son, the Count of Monte Cristo began to question his vengeful actions for the first time. While Villefort certainly deserved his fate and could be ruthless enough to murder his illegitimate son and conspire against the innocent Dantes, their son was ultimately blameless. The Count began to realize that he was not the embodiment of justice and could not replace God in passing judgment. This realization allowed Danglars to escape with his life, albeit at the cost of his fortune, making him perhaps the luckiest of all the Count's enemies. In the final letter addressed to young Moreau, the Count signed his name as Edmond Dantes and the Count of Monte Cristo, signifying his return from being a god to being a man, but a man who had undergone a transformative journey similar to that of the Count of Monte Cristo. The Count of Monte Cristo's transformation is also closely tied to one person, Haydée. As Fernand de Villefort's sordid past was exposed, the mysterious background of Haydée also came to light. Haydée was the daughter of Ali Pasha. After Ali Pasha's defeat and death, both Haydée and her mother were captured as slaves. The Count initially purchased her as a witness against de Villefort, but over the years, their relationship transformed from master and servant to that of a father and daughter, and eventually, lovers. Many readers may consider Haydée a somewhat insignificant character in the novel, and some might even argue she could be omitted from the story entirely. She appears in the narrative fewer than 10 times and seems more like an exotic element sprinkled into the tale. However, Haydée is more than she appears. She serves as an emotional link that connects the Count of Monte Cristo back to the world of mortals. Mercedes represents the past and the life the Count left behind when he embarked on his revenge mission. Since that day, he had become cold and detached from all emotional connections. Without Haydée, the Count of Monte Cristo, in the pursuit of his revenge, would have no real purpose or hope for the future. Haydée, like a gift from the heavens, symbolizes that future and hope. The Count suddenly realizes his deepening feelings for the girl on the eve of his duel with Albert, and he becomes attached to the world once more. In the end, he accepts Haydée's love, marking the beginning of a new life. Alexandre Dumas excelled in crafting multifaceted female characters, which was remarkable for his time when women were often portrayed as weak and virtuous. In a 19th-century society dominated by patriarchy, Dumas invested more effort and detail into creating complex female characters. In The Three Musketeers, Milady de Winter broke the mold of the usual virtuous and gentle female characters, emerging as a daring and cunning femme fatale who still captivates readers today. The primary female characters in The Count of Monte Cristo may not be as striking as Milady, but they have their own unique qualities. Mercedes is portrayed as beautiful and dignified, conforming to conventional expectations, but her strength shines through. After Edmond Dantes is wrongfully imprisoned, she supports her family for years while caring for Edmond's father and tirelessly working for his release. When she learns the truth, she bravely abandons wealth and titles to return to a simple life in her homeland. In addition, there's a secondary female character in the novel, Danglars' daughter. Danglars has been arranging a marriage for his daughter, but she has little interest in matrimony and instead aspires to pursue a career in the arts. Her unconventional views on marriage, wealth, and independence make her a character who stands out, even in the context of the 21st century. Alexandre Dumas' ability to create such compelling female characters is one of the reasons why he became a world-renowned best-selling author. His characters are not one-dimensional but multifaceted, adding depth and richness to his narratives. Another factor contributing to his success is the brisk pace of his storytelling. Despite the Count of Monte Cristo being over 1,000 pages long, it remains a gripping and engaging read, never losing momentum, which aligns well with the reading habits of modern audiences. Lastly, Dumas' masterful storytelling skills are evident throughout the novel, with dramatic conflicts scattered throughout the plot, unexpected twists and turns, and seemingly insignificant events that later prove to be pivotal. These elements are woven into the narrative with expertise, ensuring that readers are constantly engaged and occasionally surprised, making him a master storyteller of his time. Without exaggeration, it can be said that Alexandre Dumas set a whole set of standards for popular novels in the future, and even for today's blockbuster movies. Lastly, we cannot overlook the advantage of language. In today's world, English is the dominant language, but in the 19th century, French was undoubtedly the dominant language. Nobility in some countries took pride in being fluent in French, which undoubtedly promoted the spread of French literature. Especially novels with strong readability like The Count of Monte Cristo would be translated into various languages and spread rapidly. Alexandre Dumas had a knack for accurately capturing the reader's psychology. Therefore, he would add some oriental elements to satisfy the reader's imagination. He would also inject some motivational wisdom, but it never felt preachy. Instead, it was inspiring and became classic quotes. Like the resounding 5 words at the end of The Count of Monte Cristo, wait and hope. Simple yet powerful, leaving room for endless imagination. The Count also had a discussion about happiness. There is neither happiness nor unhappiness in this world. There is merely the comparison of one state with another, nothing more. This wisdom about life is what Alexandre Dumas wanted to convey to the readers through The Count of Monte Cristo. The Count of Monte Cristo is, in simple terms, a revenge story filled with excitement and enmity. In a deeper sense, it also serves as a critique of 19th century French society. For instance, Villefort could manipulate justice to send the innocent to prison for personal gain. Danglars' immense wealth was acquired through insider trading, affecting the normal financial order. Fernand, a traitor to his master, returned to France and became a respected military man with a noble title. Alexandre Dumas candidly pointed out these societal maladies, such as corruption, the hidden hand of justice, financial manipulation, and the hypocrisy and callousness of the upper class. Reading about these issues is undoubtedly satisfying for readers. The author also used vivid language to satirize the hypocrisy and heartlessness of the upper class, like Madame Danglars adhering to the principle of every man for himself when she saw her husband about to go bankrupt, and promptly taking her money and lover to meet in secret. Reading such passages always elicits a smile. Alexandre Dumas was a writer who had a keen insight into human nature. His characters were fleshed out, and his stories exuded warmth and human touch. Human nature is universal, transcending time and space barriers, and even in today's world, his works continue to be beloved. French writer Gustave Flaubert praised Dumas' novels as a source of pleasure, like a magic lantern. We believe this magic lantern will continue to illuminate the imaginations of readers in the future. To summarize, in this discussion, we covered several key points. 1. The Count of Monte Cristo continues to be popular for several reasons: compelling characters, a fast-paced narrative, and Alexandre Dumas' storytelling expertise. 2. The novel's themes of revenge and escape have inspired countless works, including The Shawshank Redemption, Prison Break, and Legend of the Condor Heroes. 3. Serialization was a popular format for novels in Dumas' time, characterized by engaging, cliffhanger-filled narratives and the need for authors to provide recaps of previous events. 4. The novel's inspiration came from a real-life scandal, and Dumas' skill in weaving fiction into historical context facilitated reader immersion. 5. Dumas' use of Oriental elements and inspirational wisdom contributed to the enduring appeal of his works. 6. The Count of Monte Cristo is not only a thrilling revenge story but also a critique of 19th-century French society, addressing issues such as corruption, financial manipulation, and the hypocrisy of the upper class. Well, that concludes the content for this episode. If you enjoyed my video, please click like, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends. Thank you.